Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar series of the Nahrein Network channel. Today is the 3rd of December 2020, and we are pleased to hear two wonderful, interesting presentation from Professor Petersen and Dr. Samir. I would like to welcome all the participants in this webinar. The format of the webinar will be very traditional, despite of the instrument we are using, Zoom. We will first listen to the two presentations from our speakers, and then, of course, there will be room for questions, and I will be pleased to leave the room to participants to ask their questions through their microphones. So as a first thing, I would like to let you know that this presentation and discussion will be recorded. So by participating in this Zoom webinar, you are giving consent to be recorded. And I also would like to remind everybody to keep the microphone off while not speaking to avoid the echo. So first of all, just a little bit of introduction and presentation. I am the chair of this webinar. My name is Claudia Trillo, and I am a reader at the University of Salford in the UK. I am an academic and a chartered architect. I have an interest in traditional architecture, and I'm currently working with MENA countries, in particular with Jordan, on a Newton Fund project. So I'm particularly pleased to introduce to you this topic of the heritage city of Basra in Iraq, because this is really an incredible case study. It is called the Venice of Middle East for its beauty, and today we have two speakers who are really experts in this topic, and Professor Petersen will talk first. Professor Petersen is a director of research in Islam archaeology, and he is an expert on Ottoman architecture. So he will focus today on history and architecture in the city of Basra. And he is a professor at the University of Wales, Trinity Saint David. Thanks, Professor Petersen, for being with us this afternoon, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for the introduction. What I'll talk about today is a little bit about the early Islamic Basra. But before I do that, I'd just like to say that the survey work and the work we've carried out so far has been a collaboration between myself and Alistair North Edge, and institutionally it's been supported by the Max van Bertram Foundation, the British Institute for the Study of Iraq, Basra Museum, and also the University of Wales. And in particular, I think it's important at this stage to say that Katan Al-Abid has been very, very helpful, and without him, this project wouldn't have taken place. So I'd like to say that at the beginning, because this is extremely important, given that Basra is a very important site, yet it also has its own difficulties in terms of sort of exploration and also understanding the site. So the help of the State Board of Antiquities and Heritage, apart from the sort of official support for the project. Their support through Katan Al-Abid and his team in Basra has really been invaluable. So what I'm going to do really is just show you some pictures and also some maps, and just talk a little bit about really the heritage and archaeological potential of Basra. I suppose, first of all, it's worth showing where Basra is for those of you who are unfamiliar. So this is a map from Denmark, showing the location of Basra. This is from the David Museum in Copenhagen, but you can see Basra is located within the Middle East, right next to the Arabian Peninsula, and really at the intersection between Arabia and Mesopotamia, or modern-day Iraq. And it's also located at the head of the Arabian or Persian Gulf. So I think just from this very large overview, you can see that Basra really has a very important location at that intersection between the desert, between the rivers of Mesopotamia, the highlands of Iran, and the Persian Gulf. And also you can see, in terms of sort of trade routes, it's very well located on the trade routes between the Indian Ocean on the right and the Mediterranean on the left. So really, it's a really crucial location in connecting two major world trading systems. This is just a much closer view showing the location of Basra in relation to other early Islamic or Middle Islamic cities. So you can see Basra here, and the Tigris and the Euphrates, and also Kufa, Wasit, Baghdad, Samara, and Mosul. And these are all really important cities during the early Islamic period from the 7th century onwards. So this is a sort of urban context within which Basra was founded. Although I should say, as usual, that as with any new foundation, Basra, the location of Basra actually shares a location with an earlier pre-Islamic Sasanian city, Uballa, and that Basra was really a new city sharing a similar location. So we know, for example, that the Sasanian port also on the waterway to the Gulf was also very much open to Indian Ocean trade. So Basra is a continuation and an expansion of an already existing trading system. And now you can see closer up, you can see this is a map of the southern Iraq, showing the location of Al-Basra in relation to the marshes, the entrance to the Persian Gulf to the south, or the bottom of the picture, and also the modern palm belt where the date palms lined both the Euphrates and the Shatt al-Arab, which is a combination of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. The other thing that's worth pointing out here, for those of you less familiar with Basra, is you can see obviously the city of Al-Basra is marked here on the Shatt al-Arab, and this location of Basra is actually not the location of the early Islamic city. The early Islamic city is much closer to Az-Zubayr, which you can just see below Al-Basra. So Az-Zubayr is the location of the early Islamic settlement. I should have pointed out that Basra is one of the earliest Islamic cities to be founded, and really the first one outside Arabia. So in that case, in that sense, it's extremely important for studying all aspects of Islamic Muslim culture. So, but for a variety of reasons, it hasn't really been studied in great detail until the late 20th century. There's some awareness of this beforehand, but really it wasn't studied in great detail. So this drawing from the 17th century is a Dutch view of Basra, and this is the modern Basra, the Basra which you can go to today. If you go to Basra, this is a view of this settlement during the 17th century. So this gives you the idea that the old city of Basra, the early Islamic Basra, which I'm talking about, was actually is actually quite old and is not and had already been surpassed by the 17th century, although in fact it's much earlier, probably around the 10th century, that the old early Islamic site of Basra was abandoned. So just to say quickly, this later Basra, the one that took over from the early Islamic Basra, was based around the Ashar Creek, and it's a city or town that's suffused with canals. And as Claudia has said, it's got the reputation of being the Venice of the Middle East, or at least Iraq, because of it, the large numbers of canals which provide transport, and in the past would have provided access both to the marshes and also to the south to the ocean-going ships connecting to the Indian Ocean. Okay, I'll just say a little bit more about the location and the discovery of the early Islamic city of Basra. First of all, okay, so the city was founded in the 7th century, and by the 10th century, the site seems to have moved to the modern port city of Basra. Exactly the reasons for this is not quite clear. One of the often cited reasons is because of attacks of the Karamate from Bahrain, that they sacked the city of Basra, and so this made it uninhabitable. I think it's much more likely that there are also environmental changes. Iraq, particularly southern Iraq, is very much prone to changes of the topography due to shifting watercourses. In fact, what's interesting about this area is that the whole area is in a sense an area where the ground is still being formed by deposits from the Tigris and Euphrates River. So it's an area that's actively being a landscape that's actually actively being formed and modified. And in fact, this is one of the difficulties in understanding the site of the early Islamic Basra, simply because the landscape has been so much modified by human activity that it's very difficult to understand exactly where anything was located. This is particularly the case with the watercourses. But in terms of sort of memories of the location, we know that really the location of the early Islamic city was always remembered. And we have, for example, the 16th century Ottoman sea captain, Sayyid Ali Reis, and he came to Basra in the 1550s to what you'd recognise as the modern Old Town, but he actually visited what he believed to be the early Islamic town. So there's certainly a memory of the early Islamic town, which was located to the south of the port city, and there he visited a number of tombs. And the tombs, like Hassan al-Basri and the tomb of Zubayr, these help really in kind of locating that and remaining as a memorial to that early Islamic city. Now, the map you're looking at the moment is a map made by Massignon, and he visited, Louis Massignon, he visited Basra in the early 20th century, between 1907 and 1945. And he's the person that really started the scientific study of the archaeology of Basra. And so this is a map which he made based on 2 visits to the site, and also on an aerial photograph supplied to him by the oil company, Iraq Petroleum. And this Massignon's map has really formed the basis for most modern interpretations of the topography of the ancient city of Basra. So, for example, this is one that's reproduced in Paul Wheatley's book, and it shows it's really based on the reconciliation of the topographic features identified by Massignon with the literary and historical sources which divide the city into various tribal divisions. Now, one of the things that features very much in early accounts of the foundation of Basra by authors such as Baladuri, citing earlier sources, is that the Basra was founded at this sort of really liminal location between the settled agricultural lands of Iraq and the desert. And also it's quite important that it was founded on what they said was kind of a stony ground. So in other words, lifted up from the above the marshes, somewhere which would be dry and suitable for camp. And the other thing that's stated in these accounts is that early on, Basra was not really intended to be a city, but rather an encampment, temporary camp, which would be used for those armies, Arab armies traveling further into Iran and Central Asia. And so this would be a point where they could rest and come back to in another season. But gradually and almost inevitably, it developed into a city simply because of the strategic importance of the site, and also because of the presence of the Arab armies meant that this site developed as a major Muslim settlement. But those very early on, the settlement was said to be built of reeds and wood, and this is just an example of the type of structure you may have. The other thing that's attracted a lot of attention from scholars looking at early Basra is the marketplaces. This is a current market, but just to show you the persistence of marketplaces in the region. Okay, and here is a map of the marketplaces, which was produced by Ali in the 1980s, showing you the location of various markets reconciled again with the topography. And again, here you can see the Shatt al Arab, which is presumed to have been on a different course at this point. So one of the possible explanations for the shift of the settlement is actually the shift of this waterway away from what is the old site of Basra. So that's like a sort of quick background to Basra. And then in terms of actual archaeological excavations, archaeological investigation of the site, this was really began during the 1970s and 1980s by the State Board of Antiquities and Heritage. And this was a program of excavations and surveys really designed to map what was around on the site. And also this is really regarded as a kind of cultural protection exercise, simply because the town of Zubair, which is located, you can see on this photograph, it's roughly in the center of the map. This is a settlement which was founded in the 18th century, but which grew. And certainly from the 1970s, it was beginning to grow much larger and encroach on the site of the early site. So this is a map that produced by the State Board of Antiquities, and it shows you the extent of what they thought the archaeological site was. So this area was reserved from development because it was regarded as highly important for the history of for the national heritage. And as part of this, a large number of excavations were carried out simply to look at the extent of settlement and remains within the city. Now, just talking about Zubair, which you see in the middle of this slide, more recently, there's been a study of the old city of Zubair, or old town, small town of Zubair, which is located on top of the site of early Islamic Basra, and it's been suggested that the old town of Zubair actually preserves some of the street alignments of the early Islamic city. So in other words, perhaps it may be the case that Zubair, rather than being a totally new foundation in the 18th century, was in fact in some ways a contraction of the very early Islamic city. This has yet to be demonstrated archaeologically, but it's something that may be worth considering. Here you see a map from the 1930s, a British map, again showing the location of Zubair, this 18th century town located on part of the old site, and just to the right, you can see marked Al Jama, or the mosque, and this is the site of the mosque of Basra, and this was long recognised again by Sayyid Ali Rees in the 16th century. This was long recognised as the site of the mosque and probably of the early Islamic site of Basra. So that's just a little brief introduction, and I'll just say quickly now a little bit about the work we've done. The work's been divided into three main types. The first is UAV survey. So this is using essentially a drone to take photographs of the site from the air, and using photogrammetry and ground control points. This is a ground control point being established using photogrammetry tied to fixed points on the ground. We've been able to produce detailed topographic maps of the site, which are accurate to within 6 millimeters. So here's just this shows you the area that we surveyed using the drone, and with the site of the mosque of Khatwa Imam Ali marked, and again the site of Zubair. You can just see Zubair written down on towards the Google sign on this map, but the city of Zubair, which is encroaching quite a lot onto the reserved archaeological area. So we only documented the area that was currently unoccupied and still available for excavation, and which still preserves the beneath the ground level the early Islamic city. So this is one of an example of one of the photo mosaics which we produced using photogrammetry. So you can see on here again the mosque which is towards the right, and just around that you can see a channel, and so that's the site of the mosque, and that's this gives you a virtual appearance of an aerial photograph. And then here we've got a closer image, and this is a topographic map, again relief map, showing again the mosque right in the center and this channel to the right. So what we're able to do with this aerial survey is to get a really detailed view of the topography of the site. There's so many features that are visible on the surface, and this is and on the surface it's quite hard to understand what exactly some of these features mean, but from the air we can get a much better view. The second element of this work was geoarchaeological survey. So this was taking cores using a sand auger, which were drilled into the ground and taking samples from various depths. We had various difficulties with this in places throughout the site. One of the problems was the presence of fired bricks, that's hard fired ceramic bricks, meant that in many places it was very, very difficult to actually get samples with the auger. This is just what the sand auger looks like. So this device actually takes cores from known depths beneath the ground level, and these cores can give some indication of the type of soil, the type of deposits, and also retrieve some material, including ceramic material and organic material. And this is the coring in action. This is on a typical view of the site in Basra, and you can see it requires quite a lot of strength to dig into the ground using this auger, and you just add extra lengths of metal rod as you increase the depth, and you measure that depth, so you get a very accurate idea of the types of deposits at each depth. Here we're this is Martin Bates, and he's being assisted by Nahrein Hyab, who is a Basra geologist who is helping us with understanding that both the geological and the man-made deposits within Basra. So this is just a map just showing you quickly the two areas we used the geoarchaeological survey on. The most successful was actually in Area A, just south of the mosque. Okay. The third element is the actual ground survey, and in particular looking at the sites excavated by the State Board of Antiquity and Heritage, mostly in the 1980s, but and also more recent sites. And this also gives you an idea, this photograph, you can see lots of fired bricks strewn on the surface, and these are remains of an excavated building. But this also gives you an idea of the sort of problems we ran into with the geological coring, because these are actually very difficult to excavate or to drill through. Here's an example of some of the typical ceramics which were retrieved by Alistair North Edge during the ground survey, and this gives you an indication. These are typical Sasanian Islamic vessels, remains with the you can see on them the remains of marks for pottery stilts. And also here we've got examples of a very important type of ceramic which was probably developed in Basra, which is this whiteware, often referred to as tin opacified lead glazed ceramics, which is very typical of Basra and is presumed to have been made in imitation of Chinese porcelain, which was already being imported into Basra at an early date. So this photograph shows at the top there's two examples of Iraqi whiteware, and then below the lower fragment or sherd is a fragment of porcelain. You can see obviously the difference. The porcelain is very different quality, but also you can see the resemblances of what the Iraqi potters from Basra were aiming for. Okay, just finally, I'll just show you a little bit more about the sites looked at during the ground survey. So here there's a photograph showing 3 of the sites that we investigated and have been exposed and are available for visitors. And so site 1, this is site 1, which includes some houses which are excavated and partially rebuilt during the 1980s to give an idea of how they would have functioned. One of these houses was equipped with a serdab or underground cellar where people could retreat during the extremely hot summers in Basra. Site 2, which is near the Antiquities Departmental Office in Old Basra. Again, you can see some of the buildings which have been mud brick buildings which have been restored. They pose a real challenge for conservation simply because the mud brick, once exposed, is liable to decay with rainfall. So it's been plastered over, but it's always a challenge preserving mud brick architecture. But within these mud brick structures, you can see some early examples of stucco which have been preserved from the excavations. And here again an example of early stucco work or carved plaster work from within the second set of buildings. And site 3 is the remains of a large palatial type building, again conserved this time with using a mud covering over the top of the walls, and again showing the outline of the buildings. Finally, I'm just going to have a quick look at the mosque itself, the mosque, the presumed site of the early Islamic mosque of Basra. We've looked at this a few times. Again, you can see just at the bottom of the screen the remains of a channel. And this area, this large area that's laid out, is an area which is really defined from the Iraqi excavations during the 1970s and 80s, where they excavated on the site of the mosque and they found both the remains of fired brick walls and also sandstone columns. This is a view of that same area from an aerial photo, an RAF aerial photograph from the 1930s, again showing the extreme complexity of the topography and the remaining corner of the mosque. This is a plan of the mosque made by the State Board of Antiquities from 1984, showing a reconstructed version of the mosque with the monumental portal. And these are photographs of during the excavation of the mosque in the 1980s. And this is the only standing remains really of this mosque. This standing remains has often been thought of as dating to the 8th century, 700s, but it's probably a much later part of the architecture of the mosque, probably dating to the 10th or 11th century. Again, you can see that tower, which is really just the corner of the building in the background, with the modern mosque to the left and a modern minaret. But in the foreground, you can see these large remains of these large columns, which would have supported the arcades, which formed the mosque. The literary historical accounts describe that the columns were built from stones quarried from Jebel Sanam, which is to the south of Basra, near the border with Kuwait. And this is a close-up of those column column sections which were found in the during the excavations. And again, another view of the mosque. You can see the tower roughly in the middle, the modern mosque, and the outline as defined by the excavations. And again, we've got this channel which seems to have been built to go around the mosque, giving us the idea that the channel, or this now dry water channel, probably was built after the mosque. Here's a view of the of this channel from the walls of the mosque, and again we have here a 5 brick structure, either possibly a bridge or a 5 brick structure which was dug through by when it was cut into when the channel was actually created. Again, here you can see the line of that ancient water channel with the mosque in the centre, and again back to the right. Just one last thing which I'd like to say quickly is one of the things which we were interested in defining in the city, on the site, was the actual extent of the archaeological site. Here you can see Alistair North Edge on the left, taking a photograph of what we believe to be an outer enclosure wall of the city. This was clearly marked on the, or used as a basis by the State Board of Antiquities when they made their archaeological designated area. And this wall, which is presumably quite early, seems to be what they used to demarcate that area. Here you can see a view of the wall which has been cut through recently by to provide access to somewhere in to another part of the site. And you can see it's cut through, and you can see the remains of a mud brick wall in the centre, and just next to it a smaller, another section of the wall, perhaps added later or perhaps contemporary. Again, here's another detailed view of that. One of the other reasons I showed you this picture as well, though, is to show you modern incursions on the site. So this was taken, these 2 photographs were taken about 8 months apart, and within that time somebody built a concrete wall and a new house right adjacent to this wall. So in many senses this is also sort of rescue work, or simply because the site is threatened, and without actively defining and investigating the remains of the city, it can easily be encroached upon. So one of them, again, another view of the wall with the modern wall in front, threatening the early wall. You can see this, the early wall, which probably dates from the 9th or 10th century, weren't able to date it yet. It was built out of Pise blocks, in other words, is moulded earth laid in sections and rammed earth. This is just an example of the good state of preservation, but as you can see, it's quite vulnerable. You can see a few of scrapes in the side of the wall from a modern bulldozer, so imminently threatened. And also the wall also includes remains of what we believe to be buttresses. Here you can now Ayubi is pointing to the remains of one of these semicircular engaged buttresses against the wall. Just another view of that wall, and again, so we've seen that before. And this is so far where we've got to on understanding the plan of Basra. This is an interpretation made by Alistair based on our work at the site. So, and this is using a corona photograph. So you can see the site of the early Islamic city near Al Zubayr is located on sort of the stony ground, and to the top of the picture you can see a lower area which has been labelled as an area which is liable to inundation or rather flooding. And here you can see remains of early fields and canals. And so this is an area very much for irrigated agriculture, whereas the site of the city or town is located higher up on this kind of stony ground. And then also on here we've got the wall line, which you saw earlier, marked, and also we've also got traced the lines of this early channel, which seems to have respected the mosque and therefore was probably built later than the mosque. One idea is that this channel or canal was actually may represent a contraction of the early city, or alternatively it could have been built as water supply. This is an ongoing piece of research, but just to give you an idea of where we've got to. So yeah, thank you for listening, and that's just a very quick and brief overview of where we've got to with the work so far. Okay.
Presentation is still fresh. May I open the floor to questions from the public? Feel free either to use the chat box in case you don't have a microphone, or to ask questions just switching your microphone on and just asking freely, please.
Hello, this is Alistair North Edge here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I'd just like to add a small point to what which I discovered recently, to what Professor Petersen has said, and that is that the line of the city wall, which you showed drawn in red on the Corona image from the 1960s, should be in fact the city wall that was constructed by the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur. That is in 772, when the city was very large.
Wow.
And in fact, a colleague, Peter Brown, measured the size of the city in this time inside the wall, and it is extraordinarily large. I hadn't realized how large it was. It's 22.5 kilometers squared. 22.5 square kilometers is an enormous size.
Amazing.
For example, Samarra was 68 square kilometers, but that is an enormous city. So I just thought that piece of information could suggest that this wall was surrounding the city when it was the biggest.
Fantastic.
And at its largest size. And at that time, it was indeed a very large city in, let us say, the 2nd century of the Hijra, or the early 3rd century of the Hijra. That's 8th or 9th centuries. I just thought that was an interesting point.
No.
Anyway.
No, that's. I think that's very, very useful, extremely interesting. Just one thing I'll just say quickly, because I think there's other questions. I mean, and I think Hamed's going to be able to speak soon. But just one thing I'd say is with the coring which we did, we had. So if you can add to that 22.5 square kilometers, the depth of deposit which we found at a distance about 500 meters to the south of the mosque, we found about 5 meters of deposit, and we got radiocarbon dates from them. And they again confirm these dates. So we have dates from the 8th century to the early 7th century. Within about 5 meters. So as well as being a very large area, it looks like it's extremely densely built up. Okay.
Well, thank you. There is a question in the chat box from Mihir, who is asking what are the top 5 heritage archaeology priorities?
Whilst we're going, yeah, okay, what are the top 5 heritage priorities? From what I can see, just from my personal view, and in view of what Alistair's just said then, in terms of the size of the city, I'd say one of the top priorities really is to really education about people living in the vicinity of Basra, to really about the place that they live and about the impact of developing, in particular building houses on the site, on the early Islamic site. And the way that the best way of dealing with that is probably education, and actually some sort of big projects which could get people involved and really make the site into something. You saw those sites that we investigated, that were excavated in the 1970s and 80s, and simply actually working on those sites and getting them restored and information would, I think, help towards educating people about the significance of the site and its protection.
Dr Hamed Samir is an academic with a background in engineering and architecture, and studied the heritage of Basra from the perspective of the architecture and the engineering field, obviously. And his presentation will focus on the diversity of cultural heritage of Basra city. I was fortunate enough to be the thesis supervisor for his PhD, or Dr. Hamed Samir, and I can witness that he knows in depth all the different aspects of conservation heritage in Basra, and having advised also the city of Basra and other governmental agencies and planning agencies on planning and making decision for all the Basra. So from another angle, I'm glad to introduce you the second speaker of this Nahrein Network channel house webinar series, Dr. Hamed Samir. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I will talk today about the diversity of the cultural heritage of Basra city. I suppose some of you about Basra, maybe the others, they don't know about it. So therefore, I will start with the short brief about the history of the city of Basra. However, background about the history of the city. Firstly, Basra is the first city built by Muslim out of the Arabian Peninsula. It was 1400 years ago. It was a famous educational and cultural center in the area, in the Middle East, or in the Arabian area, Arabian Peninsula. And it was also Al-Marbad poetry festival was holding every year in the city of Basra, and most of the poetry was coming together on this event. The mosque of the city of Basra, as we see in this picture, Professor Petersen talked about it. It's called the Mosque of Imam Ali today, or it's called Khutwat Ali. There is many shrines, as I said. For example, this shrine of the Az-Zubair ibn al-Awwam. He is a close friend for Prophet Muhammad. He was killed in the Jamal battle. And this is the shrine of Talha. He is also his friend, the friend of Prophet Muhammad, and also killed in the same battle at that time. There is also the shrine of the Al-Hasan al-Basri, which has a unique minaret It is very unique minaret, and it's in the whole Islamic world. And it's also in the Zubair city now, as Professor Petersen mentioned in his presentation. And this is the Adam tree, which is in the north of Basra, and the area where the Tigris and Euphrates meeting. And the story is related to the Adam, and it's the story said this is the first tree that Adam, when he coming down from the heaven, he do it. So there is many other shrine and mosque in the Basra city. As mentioned before, regarding the location of Basra, Basra is located at the south of the Iraq and the north of the Arabian Gulf. It is a border city with the three countries, Iran and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. This location gives the city opportunity to cross-pollination with the other cultural from the different country, the neighbor countries. And it's also the only seaport for Iraq. And therefore, the trade with India and with China at that time gave also the society to cross-pollination with the other culture, with different cultures. So in addition to that, the Basra is the richest city of the oil. It's not just in Iraq and the worldwide. It's the richest city of the oil on the worldwide. So it's economic now. It's the Iraqi economic center, and also it's the only seaport for the Iraq. As we see in this slide, there is three different environments in Basra city. The first one at the west, which is a desert environment, it is called Az-Zubair, as that mentioned before. And this is the old city of the Basra that's established 1,400 years ago. And the other environment is the marsh on the north of Basra in Al-Qurna and Al-Mdaina city on the north of Basra, and the city center of Basra, of course. So this is the three different natural environment in the city. It is a unique style. There is not available in other cities. So according to this different natural environment, the built environment and the cultural and the lifestyle also was different between these three parts. And I will start with the comparison between these three parts. First, I will start with the architectural style, the comparison between the three parts with the architectural style. According to the middle one, and the salt wall, and also for the scale of the building, this is for example, the city center is 2 floors, while the Zubair is 1 floor, and also the marshes is 1 floor. Regarding to the local materials that used for building in the Basra city, it's depend about the materials that are available on the area. So in Zubair, they use the clay. This is the first one. They use the clay as the main material used for building because it's available in the desert, and they use it. And as you see, the thick wall the thick wall is reach about between 80 centimeter to 100 centimeter, especially for the external wall, because they protect them from and they give them a comfortable environment inside the house. Because as you know, the harsh climate in the Basra is very hottest city in the world. It's reached about 55 degrees sometime in the summer. So this is the difference between the material according to and I was to mention all the materials that used at that time for the traditional houses in these three regions. it was a sustainable materials. Social relationship. The slides show the interaction between the people in the three. The social relationship is very strong on the city of Basra. However, there's a little bit difference between the three parts. For example, on the Zubair, the first one, the social relationship is and the interaction between the people is very strong. Between the people who lives in the city, whether they are or families or friends and so on. And the show this picture show the interaction between the people. This is called this is in occasion or is in the first day after Ramadan. You know that Ramadan is the month of the fasting for the Muslim, and the first day is the festival of the Eid. They called it Eid, it's a Muslim festival, and this is the first breakfast after Ramadan. They share from each family on this neighborhood, for example, or in this street, share the dishes, and they have their breakfast together on the street at the first morning. While in the marsh, they have also the same. Most of the men, they are engaged together and they meeting together at the morning to have a coffee in the traditional house, which is called al-mudif in the marsh, and they discuss about their lifestyle, their life issue, and discuss about the issue that is important for their life. In the city center, there is a little bit difference because the engagement, because most Zubair west of the Basra and the marshes on the north of Basra, the society depends on the tribe and the big family. While in the modern and the city center, the society is more modern and don't depend on the tribe. So the social relationship and the interaction between the people a little bit different, a little bit not stronger than the other parts. But also the young people, as we see in this picture, they engage together and they meeting, especially at the night, with the others in their neighborhoods. Regarding the transportation, also the difference between the transportation and the three parts, very clear. And as we see in the Zubair, they use a traditional carriage pulled by the horses, and while in the city center, they use the old traditional wooden bus, which is still represented a very traditional icon in the city of Basra nowadays. While in the north of the Basra and the marsh, they the traditional ports is the main represent the main transportation means in this area, and the only mean on the to move and to move in this area because the marsh, which is called al-mashhuf. And this is the difference between this transportation as responses for the natural environment that's different between the three parts. Regarding also the food and the traditional meals, each of these area has its own traditional meal. For example, in Zubair, the main traditional meal is called al-masmuta. In Iraq is called al-masmuta, which is a fish drying under the sun for 2 or 3 weeks, and then to drying, and then they cook as a soup, whether there is yellow soup or sometimes red soup. It's called ad-dolma. It is the main dish in the city center. It is a rich, it is a rice put inside grape leaves. It's very common in the Iraqi cities, in all Iraqi cities, But in Basra city, the dolma is different than the other part in Iraqi because it's more salty. It's used as a salt rice, while in the other parts of Iraq they use it sweet. At the marsh, the north of the Basra, the small fish is the main. It's called sprat. Is the main dish for people who live there because it's available in this area, and some use it as grilled and also or fried. Also, there is a different for cake and bread. For so also there is a different differences between the three parts. For example, in Zubair they used a special kind of bread which called a taftouni, as they see, which is a bread with holes inside it. On the city center there is a difference. They used they have the own kind of the traditional cake called ekleje, as we see in this picture, and this is always used for the festival, especially for the Eid, as we said after Ramadan, for the guests they coming to celebrate together. While in the marshes, as see in this picture, the traditional bread called a siyah. This is a siyah, which is made by rice flour, not wet flour. And as you see, it is a very big size for than the other in Zubair and in Basra city center. In this slide, we talk about the crafts. And as we see, each of these three areas has a special traditional sort of crafts. For example, in Zubair, the traditional slippers was a famous in the Arabian Gulf, not in Basra city as well, but also in the Arabian Gulf countries, which was made exclusive in Zubair city, and therefore it's called al-Zubairi slippers, or called sometimes Khaza slipper. It was imported to another country, as I mentioned, in the other in the area of the Arabian Peninsula. And the city center, Basra was the main source of the date for Iraq and for Middle East countries. The kind of the date in Basra city is very special, and it's not available everywhere. Especially the one of the kind is called barhi. It is very tasty, and it was a very special kind of the date. And this is the main crafts in the city center. While in the marsh, as we see in this picture, show the women that makes traditional bags and basket and dish made by papers and mat, for example, and reed. This is they use it as economic, for example, they to live to sold it on the market. Also about the childhood, there is the children also have their different kind of playing and games in each of the three parts of the city of Basra. Depends on what available in their natural environment, as we see between the marsh, because they use the water, and Zubair, and also the city center. Regarding the craft, the costumes, for the costumes and the fashions, also there are differentiation between them, especially for men and also for the women. For example, in Zubair, as we see in this picture, they wearing a black headband and with a red head cover. It's called kofiya. The headband called agal or aqal, and the head cover called kofiya in Arabic, and with the black spot, red color with the black spot. While in the marshes, they used the same. For example, they used white. They used headband, black one, and they used white head cover with a black spot. This is the difference between the Mars and Zubair. There's just the color. And for the city center is the difference, a huge difference between them, because the situation is very different in the city center, because they're wearing a modern style such as shirt and trousers and jacket. After the comparison, I want just to talk about the transformation that happened for the architectural style and the heritage during the 20th century. And as we see, the Basra city passed through a huge transformation during the 20th century. It started with the Ottoman period, which is early 19th century. And as you see, the style of the houses and the style of the architectural style, for example, the interior style, the decoration in the bricks, the style of the doors and windows, the shanashil, and the landmark. For example, this called a Sorin clock, or Sa'at Sorin, which was the very famous landmark in Basra city. And is demolished 50 or 40 years ago. The second one is the British period, which is started in 1940, as we see in this picture. This is the soldier enter Basra city, the British soldier enter Basra city in 1914. And also they have their own style, which is a little bit different than the Ottoman period. They start a new building, a new activated, a new functions starting on the Basra city. For example, this one is airport of Basra, and this one is the school, the main school, the Al Markaziyya school, is the central school of the Basra city. The market of the Ashar, which is established by the British in 1920, and also this is the office of the port, which is also designed by Wilson in Basra city, architect Wilson, which is a famous architect from British Army. Sorry. And this is the landmark for the memory of the British soldier who died in Basra during that time. In this slide, I show you see the sample of the houses. I choose some sample of the houses, main houses in Basra city. For example, this one, Al Pasha Ayan houses, which was the representative of the Basra in the Iraqi Parliament, in the first Iraqi Parliament at 1921. And the second one is the houses of Uthman Wali, who was governor of the Basra in the end of the 19th century. And this house of Basha Ayan house, who was sorry, this is one for Basha Ayan house, who was the representative of the parliament. This one for As-Sabah house, who was the house of the Sabah family, the family of the Prince of the Kuwait nowadays. And this is the house of the Naqib, and this is the house of the Sheikh Khaz'al, who was the prince of the southern of the Iraq, and also the prince of the west southern of the Iran at that time. One of the most specific features which distinguished Basra from other cities is the grid of the canals and the rivers inside the city, and that give it the city the nickname is the Venice of the East. As mentioned by Professor Petersen, and also mentioned by Rashad Salim a few weeks ago in this event as well. There was more than 300 canals shaping the network on the city planning, while unfortunately no more than 4 still existing nowadays. Other rivers were landfilled and the rivers, of course, this is the rivers was representative a climate solution, as well as since the Basra was a harsh climate, especially in the summer, as we said before. Therefore, the river was used to create comfortable environment, and also used to use as the view for a nice view, and they opened their windows on this river. As I said, unfortunately today, no more than 8 rivers still existing nowadays. The current situation of the Basra city, unfortunately, the current situation is very bad. In all of the part of the city, these pictures show the marsh, how the current situation of the marsh, especially after they dry it during the previous government. And the awareness of the people also show the bad condition of these houses, traditional houses, and the rivers as well. As you see, this is the Rapash and the bad situation of the rivers nowadays. And also this is the Zubair houses today. Also many of the heritage building demolished, unfortunately, to build towers and new building, because they take the central place in the city, and this place and this is the area is very expensive nowadays. Also, these pictures show the difference between the landscape between the past and the present, and it's the huge difference between them, the unity, the colors, the materials, the harmony between the building. While unfortunately today there is no harmony, no unity, no any no good landscape and the urban landscape for the city. The challenge that for the city, there's many challenges, of course. Sorry. Okay. The challenge, there's many challenges, but challenge for in 1981, it's had bad impact and bad effect the heritage of the city of the Basra. As I mentioned, Basra is the border city with the Kuwait and with the Iran, and both of them, Iraq has had a war with them, and it was under attack every day by gun and so on. So there is many buildings has demolished. The another challenge factor is the economic factors. As I said, Basra is the very rich city on the oil, and most of the land in the city preserving for the future discovering of the oil. So there is no expansion for the city. And that's make a pressure for the city center, the old city center, and the huge increasing of the people. So there are many traditional demolished tower. Third one is the oil, also represent a very important challenge for the society and for the government as well. There is no enough awareness about the value of the heritage of the city. Significant affected on the both way, positive. And we have to work hard and encourage the investment to access in the heritage site, to preserve the heritage site. And because the investment can play a positive role in the issue of Basra city and in preserving heritage of the Basra city. And the negative side, as we see in this picture, this is 3 samples of the new project, which is very alien and very strange, and it's not respect the city identity and the city heritage and the city traditional elements and traditional image of the city of Basra. In all the difference, for example, malls and housing and building hotels and so on. Thank you so much for your listening. I'm sorry for the bad internet connection today. Thank you.
Thank you for having for not having been discouraged by technical issues, which are quite common in these days. We are all reliant on the web, unfortunately. So I think that we are all aware that we need to be patient to be able to network through the web. No problem at all. Thanks for your presentation, and I would like to ask the participant to extend slightly the duration of this webinar due to technical issues. So we do not want to limit the discussion or to create and constrain to those who may wish to ask questions to our speakers. So from the previous round of sessions, we still have a little bit of a discussion around quite a challenging but very interesting quick key question that I would like at this point to ask both our speakers. Can you please list the top 5 priorities on heritage and archaeology in Basra in terms of interventions? So what interventions would you prioritize today, both on archaeology and on heritage for the city of Basra? Professor Petersen, you listed only 1. If I remember well, it was about education. And what else?
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, so yeah, education. I think also, I think perhaps there should be something, a financial incentive for people to maintain heritage buildings. So financial incentive, because I think maintaining an historic building is very expensive, and often, even though they look very nice, they may be difficult to live in because they haven't been renovated. So I think some form of grants, and they'd have to be good grants, substantial, to renovate them. So that's financial incentives. And the other side of that, maybe financial penalties for destroying heritage. I don't know if, I think these probably exist, but they need to be enforced. And that's 3. I think related to education, but a slightly different thing, is promotion of tourism, cultural tourism. And there's plenty that can be done, as in as Hamed showed. There's a lot of things in Basra which would attract tourists, the marshes, the different ways of life. You know, there's a lot of things, you know, that would be good. So promotion of tourism. And I think obviously there's also a political dimension, as Hamed mentioned. That's obviously not easy to solve, but it's I'd say a huge issue that needs to be mentioned and somehow needs to be tackled. Yeah, that's 5.
Thank you, Professor Petersen. Dr. Samir, to you. Up to you.
As I understand from, because the internet connection is bad, I don't hear the question very well, but I understand from the answer of the Professor Petersen as yeah, there is a many challenges and there is a many variety for to maintain the heritage of the Basra city. One of them, yes, the fund, as mentioned by Petersen, because the fund is very important for maintaining the heritage and preserving the heritage building, for example. And also, as I mentioned in my presentation, the awareness of the people is very important. The problem in Basra city, there is no enough awareness or attention to the heritage building. This is complicated because this is a problem starting 40 years ago, because 1980, as I mentioned, there is the war with the Iran. Most of the people, especially the original people, leave the Basra city and they go to another cities to save city. They run away from the war. And some of them go to another country because there is a very strong relationship between the society of Basra and, for example, Kuwait and Saudi. And they take a long time there and they stay for a long time at that time. And after the war, because take about 8 years. After the 8 years, most of them, they don't back again to the Basra city. In addition, there is Basra as the economic center, attract people from another cities, especially the neighbor city, Nasriya and Umara and Sumawa, the south cities in Iraq, to come to looking for the work. And most of them, they bring their family with them, and they don't have any belonging to the environment of the Basra. They don't feel any belonging for the heritage and for the built environment on the Basra. This is make a problem. They don't care about the heritage building, and therefore there is no attention to maintain the historical and traditional building, and there is no care for demolishing the heritage building. Also, the legislation and regulations from the government, also one of the important factors, should be developed, because there is no enough attention for the heritage building. There is no new regulation, for example, or legislation to protect the heritage building and the city center. So many buildings, as I mentioned, they demolished and built by towers, the malls and the hotels and so on. I think, and there is many other challenges, for example, also. So there's many priority in the city of Basra city to maintain the heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Samir. Thanks a lot. Yes, indeed, the community awareness about the heritage values is key in order to support conservation and also enforcement by law, which is the only recipe, unfortunately, when the property market is particularly aggressive, as in the case of limited opportunities for city development outside the boundaries of the built-up area of the current city. So, anyone else from the floor? Can I please open the floor to more questions? I can see participants from different backgrounds and a lot of qualified audience, I have to say. So may I suggest, please, either text in the chat box or just put your microphone on and feel free to ask your questions, putting on your screen and microphone, whichever suits you best.
Hello, Alistair North Edge here again. Can I just add another issue onto this matter of the 5 questions or
of course,
priorities, and that is, which Professor Petersen didn't mention, and that's the importance of publication of the remains that exist today, because of course you never know how much is going to be destroyed in the future. So it's much better in some way if you can get an image of of what remains today, so that at least you know what did exist, even if it no longer exists in the future.
Thank you very much, Professor North Edge. I'm just wondering, doesn't Iraq join the IMINA project?
Yes, I think that is so. But yes, we should. I think it's always important to preserve knowledge of what exists, and the IMINA project is a very good point. I've in fact spent a good deal of my life trying to carry this out in the face of wars and other economic troubles. In fact, I'm personally best known for my work on Samarra and the remains of the Abbasid city in Samarra. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor North Edge. Indeed, heritage documentation is one of the key points, which is also endorsed, obviously, by all the non-governmental organization on heritage protection, because without documentation there is very little to do also in terms of conservation. So it's really the basic and the step number one. I think that the images that Professor Petersen has shown were absolutely amazing for quantity and quality of remains. It's really also a good way of raising awareness through documentation. So I'm just wondering, anyone else wishes to switch on microphone and camera and join the floor for questions to make this discussion wider. Please feel free. I guess everybody is enabled to switch on camera and a microphone. Good evening. I can see someone. Please, would you like to?
I just wanted to ask, is there any schemes for the young to train as renovating all these old buildings? Because it's the young who would build up the second society, the civilized society coming hopefully for Iraq. Because a lot of renovate all these old buildings, even if it's not from governmental money, but from private sponsorship.
This is a question for both speakers,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Please, who wants to start? Professor Petersen, Dr. Samir.
I think maybe I don't really know what is available at the moment in Iraq or Basra, but that sounds like, I'm sure Hamed will have some ideas about this.
Yes, possibly Hamed collaborating with the city of Basra or with other local authorities. Are you aware of possible schemes of this type? Well, I guess we can come back to this question maybe later, and by the time Hamed resolves issues with the connection, we can gather any further questions from the floor.
Could I just say something which I think is something that Alistair's been trying to do quite a lot, and it's something that I think is important, is you mentioned the IMINA Endangered Archaeology, the Middle East initiative, which I agree is very good. But I'd say one of the problems internationally is most effort in regards to Iraq's heritage seems to be directed at pre-Islamic sites and remains. Now, whilst these are really important, their relevance to local people is kind of it does have relevance, but I think the Islamic heritage is very important and is internationally, I'd say, and from an international perspective, is not valued in the way that it should be. And I think that's something that needs to be thought about.
Thank you, Professor Petersen. I also have a question, and I'm interested in asking, would you think that in a situation like the complex situation of Iraq, documentation of archaeology may create a danger for archaeological sites by exposing them to potential risk? And rather than supporting conservation may create a threat. So what is the situation in Iraq? Is your work of documenting archaeological areas a potential threat to the heritage itself?
Personally, I think there's always a problem, I suppose, that by investigating, excavating, surveying, drawing attention to something, that it could be a problem. And I know this is certainly a problem in Mosul, where during the domination by Daesh, there was a problem of perhaps by talking a lot about antiquities internationally. There was maybe that did cause problems. But I'd say, in general, it's more important to actually to have initiatives and to really, I suppose, the main thing is a question of publication, education, really, to increase awareness.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. My question was mainly driven by the curiosity, because talking to some researchers working on the IMINA project, they suggested that this risk was associated with some satellite images of archaeological site. We have a question in the chat box from Caroline Sandes. So she thanks for the presentations, and she asks, given that Basra has so much great heritage, what would it take to get the government more interested in protecting and promoting it? So when we, I guess, when we talk about government, which level of government do you mean, if you don't mind explaining? So I guess government, maybe city of Basra, but also possibly the national level as well. So different level of government. So why do you think that Basra is not protected enough? This is a question that indeed I also am very curious of hearing your perspective. Why, what would it take to get the government more interested in protecting and promoting it?
I think Hamed may have a good idea about this, I think.
I could answer.
Good.
Somebody who's grown up in Iraq. The South has been always mostly against the government, the ruling government, and it suffered a lot, especially in the Gulf War. So normally money is always centralized in the center of Baghdad. So as different wars happen, it seems a lot of the other small cities around Baghdad has been left, and Basra suffered a lot because the majority were Shia, and they're the ones who rose against Saddam for years. So they're, I guess, been punished over the years, and they've suffered a lot. Also, the environment is harsh. They're very harsh. And they suffered when they burnt all the fields too, and the marshes too, the cutting of all the palm trees, and that's made a lot of the local people leave that area. So they were not there protecting also the South. I think that's one of the reasons too. And that's it's been for years, it's not something new.
Thanks a lot for stepping in, and may I ask you, what is your perspective? So what is your do you have a role in the government, or are you an academic, or just interested in heritage?
No, just interested in heritage and being somebody who's grown up there and seeing over the years how it suffered a lot. And I was in Iraq 2 years ago, and you see all these lovely buildings just being left. And I think the gentleman, I can't remember, one of the speakers said, it's the value of the land too now. It's turned very commercial. So sometimes it's being deliberate left to being ruined and not invested, so somebody would come and buy cheaply and build a mall or build 4 or 5 houses or a block of flats. So it's the value of the land also. And also, I think a lot of outside influence are coming, buying Iraq, buying land. So a lot of all these old buildings being left or being knocked down, and there's no punishment for anybody who takes somebody's land or the property or has been knocked down. And a lot of religious places has been taken over.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is exactly what happened in Basra, as Shada mentioned. Yes, this is exactly what happened. Yeah, there's the value of the land is very high, especially in the city center. The city center is the core of the heritage building. There is a pressure for the core of the heritage building, and it's become a commercial building where they demolished. Each one can buy some houses and demolish them and to build, for example, marketing, malls or hotels or something. And there is no legislation and regulation to prevent them to demolish this building. This is the main problem. Also, there is a problem between there is no connection between the central government and the local government of the Basra. Each one has a different responsibility for the heritage. So each one said they provide funding, for example, for the preserving heritage. There is also a different view for who is responsible for preserving this heritage, which ministry, for example, local government or central government. And the intersection between the policy make a problem, and day after day, many buildings have been demolished every day. There is some, sorry, yeah. So, go on.
I mean, if you talk about the value of, if you divide Iraq, Basra is the most valuable area because it's a port. It's also a port. It's a gateway to Iraq to trade.
Right.
So anybody who would control that area, they're making a lot of money, but they're not investing, which is a shame.
I mentioned the investment in my presentation, and in the investment, unfortunately, in Basra, go in the bad way, not in the right way. There is no investment, for example, to support the heritage, to build the heritage building. Also, not just the traditional building or the historical building itself, but Also, for example, to build a new building, for example, this mall or this hotels or this commercial building, but in the traditional style, for example, to give an idea for the next generation to get to still existing the memory, to revive the memory of the heritage in the city of the Basra. Unfortunately, there is no responsible about that, and there is no controlling for the investment on the city of the Basra. And regarding for the design style, or and regarding, for example, for the site of this investment.
I assume also, if you want to renovate these old buildings, you have to use traditional ways of renovating, like making, I don't know, bricks from clay and all that. But now everybody's
For example, yeah, right.
There was a question, Hamed, that I think was appropriate for you to reply, which is which kind of funding streams or financial support are available at the moment in support of heritage conservation, if any? Because if I understand well, from the perspective of the planning law and regulation, there is a huge gap in terms of a regulatory statutory framework for heritage conservation, which needs to be filled as soon as possible before it's too late. But also there is an issue of a lack of financial support, or am I wrong in thinking that?
Yeah, this is the problem. Sorry, if I this is the problem of the preserving heritage. There is no financial support continue. For example, sometimes, especially for the government, for example, there is a little bit. It's not enough at all. Some of the NGO, for example, starting to work on Basra, and they provide some funding, for example, but it's a little bit and very shiny, and it's not enough. For example, maybe for some documentation starting, and the project also, there is many barriers for the project. For example, illegal person who live on the traditional, they occupied the traditional building in the city of the Basra, especially after 2003, and there is many barriers also, for example, the security and so on. But the funding is the main problem. So as I know, there is no enough funding to at least for documentation the still existing building in Basra city.
Thank you, Amanda. Why do you think that the government is not really interested in supporting the conservation of heritage in Basra? And why do you think that there is not enough attention from the international community on Basra? And instead, there is a lot of attention, for example, for other Iraqi cities, but not for Basra. Why do you think? What do you think that are the barriers to raise awareness on the importance of protecting the heritage in Basra?
I'd just like to say one thing in relation to sort of funding and actually to do with responsibility. I can't help noticing that Britain was invaded Iraq through Basra in the First World War in 2003, and they're probably also involved in 19. I feel, in terms of Basra, I feel Britain should have a special responsibility there. I think it's probably difficult for Iraqis to say this, but I think it's really very important that when Britain sort of very recently had some form of control in Basra province, I think there is some sort of responsibility there, and how that can be sort of activated, I don't know. But I just think it's when you're talking about particular regions of Iraq, I think Britain has a particular connection to this region, and I think it should be. I'm aware that there's problems in Iraq that would need to be overcome, but I just think in terms, and I'm also aware that there's British Friends of the Basra Museum, which is a very good initiative, British initiative. But I think it would be good if there were more commitment.
Well, thanks a lot for the questions, for the active participation from the floor. If there are no more questions from the floor, I would like to thank everybody for having been here today. And these webinars are really a unique opportunity to discuss within a highly specialized audience some topic which are of common interest. So I really wish to thank you for your patience in being with us, and thanks for the invitation to share this interesting afternoon. Thank you, Professor Petersen and Dr. Samir, for your insightful presentations, and hopefully we will still have further opportunities in the future to discuss about this such a relevant topic, such as supporting the conservation of the unique heritage, archaeological heritage and architectural heritage of Iraq and of Basra city.
Thank you.
Thank you, and bye everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.